So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me on today's CoolCare Masterclass, which is actually first of two we'll be doing, specifically looking at the rotas in CoolCare of rota management on the system. Today's Masterclass will be kind of looking at the basics of rota management, understanding the straightforward side of it before our advanced class next time. So today, well, before we get into any of that, of course, CoolCare is here to make operating your care home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. Today, we're focusing on the easier and efficient side of things, looking at, say, how to kind of use one of the bigger parts of CoolCare, the rotas, and how to get the most out of it. So while we're using Zoom today, if anyone does have any questions at any point, you can use the Q&A option on Zoom. You should be able to find that on your webinar, where you can ask any questions, and a member of our team will be on hand to answer any questions you might have on whatever we're looking through. Well, that member of our team will be able to, yes, help you out with anything you can think of. And we'll have some time at the end, once the webinar masterclass itself is finished, for you to answer any of the questions. Stick around for 5 minutes or so if you do have any questions once we're done. Yeah, anything you think of, don't be afraid to ask us, and we'll help you out as we go. So today we'll be looking, as our rotas in CoolCare. CoolCare's rotas, the most powerful part of the system I find to help managing your staff and rostering across on there. We'll also be looking at day-to-day management of our rotas and our staff on there, and the way it interacts with a couple of parts of CoolCare, the calendar specifically, or things like holidays and absences. So we'll be looking at, say, getting our staff onto the rotas and how we can assign cover for shifts and all that kind of thing on there. Looking at changing staff around and swapping shifts, so we need to make small changes to our rota, and how it interacts with our calendar for things like holidays, absences, and how they all affect it. So that's what we'll be looking at today. I'm just going to swap over to my demo system to get things started. Just as a note, all the data you see on my demo system is all fictional and for just the demonstration purposes only. No actual data being used on here, all made up for the purposes of my training. Now we'll get logged into that and we can get started. So if I share my screen there, we should all see CoolCare now. So as I say, what we'll be looking at today is a rota, specifically our rota management. So looking at the staff rota in the system under the staff section. This rota is our live rota in CoolCare, essentially taking what may have been set up in our rota setup in the background as an additional an ideal template version, giving us now a live rota on actual days and dates where I can get my staff into it and start worrying about it. So as you can see at the moment, my rota is currently empty of staff. Nobody's on at the moment. So the first thing we'll be looking at, as I say, is getting your staff onto it. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, as we'll see. So two main methods of adding our staff onto rota, depending on how your rota may have been initially created in the background, or how you can kind of add people onto it. So we have essentially where we can assign staff to a set repeating shift pattern. So if your rota is set up to have consistent shift patterns for staff members set up in there to say, this person does this set of shifts every week, every 2 weeks, we can then create that shift pattern and assign them onto it. Or it might be where your rotas are more flexible in terms of just, I say I have this number of shifts I need adding in with staff members. I'm not worried about kind of set patterns with people. I've just got a blocked out number of shifts that I need filling in on an individual basis. So you can do both of them on there and get our staff on there in different ways. So for repeating shift patterns, if you want to just assign a staff member onto one shift pattern and leave them to it, you can do that by clicking in this staff column on the left-hand side where it's currently empty. Now click on that and bring up this box for me. Tell me this is a shift pattern for a senior carer. I've selected. In order to assign to it, we need to choose a start date when that person would start on that shift pattern from. And that can be any date, as you can see there. I'll just do it from today's date as an example. And that will then bring up any staff members within your home that this position is for. So these are all the senior carers in my home I can choose from. It tells me their name there, and a tick to say this is their main position, their main role on their staff record. If I then click the person I want, it'll highlight in blue for me, and then I can click Assign Staff down the bottom of that box to save it. And that will then assign them to those shifts. You can see there, they're in today's, tomorrow's shifts. And on that repeating shift pattern, essentially indefinitely, they'll stay on there for as long as I want them to be there. As you can see. So that's kind of the idea of that. It's just a set consistent shift pattern we can assign to staff members in there. And you can do that for all different shift patterns you might have. So I'm going to do this a few times just to fill in my rota with some staff. It'll pop a different senior. You can see when someone is assigned to a different shift pattern, so we know not to put them, on two different ones. But we can assign whether we need to into each pattern there. And depending on the position, obviously the staff you could choose from will be different. So if I click on my care assistant ones, for example, here, and choose a start date for them, I got a different list of staff because these are my carers in my home. Now, some of these you can see don't have a tick to say that this is their main position. That just means that their main role is a different role within CoolCare, but they can still be added on. They have this as an extra position, so they can still be put on the shifts in here. From there, you just click on the person you want, again, assign staff, and it will pop them onto those shifts. Now, one side effect of this, actually, someone has just mentioned as a question there, is that the names should appear in the staff column on the left-hand side. Sometimes they don't right away. It's a small thing with the system. But if you just reload the rota, go out of it, come back into it, then we should see everyone's name against each shift pattern in there. Yes, it's just a small visual thing of the rota. Sometimes they don't appear on there right away, so you might have to just reload it to be able to view them on there. But yes, we'll keep adding in these. There's got a few more to do to get everyone added in. And we'll do two last one on here, a bit more filled in. And there you have it. That's how you'd handle your repeating shift patterns. Is just by any staff member that has, say, a repeating pattern on there, assign to it once, and they'll be on there for the longest, well, for the most part, and should stay assigned to it. Yes, that's how you deal with those set consistent patterns in there. As for the other shifts I've got on here, you can see these ones are set up slightly differently. Rather than being a set repeating pattern, instead, this is just a blocked out set of shifts that need filling in every day of the week. You wouldn't assign someone to that as a repeating pattern because that means they'd be in there 7 days a week, which I'm sure they wouldn't be too appreciative of. So instead, we can click on the shifts individually. So if I click on this one shift, this class care assistant for today, it then brings up this box here, where we can see all the staff members that will be able to do this shift. So this is just looking at the one rather than all of them, rather than a set pattern, but it'll show you everyone that could do this one shift. And you can see plenty of details for all the staff members in there. You've got their name, a tick if this is their main position, like on the shift patterns to tell us this is their main role within the company. If not ticked, it just means their main role is something else, so this is an extra position for them. A tick is their pool staff. So if you have multiple homes in your company and you have staff that can work between them as pool, they'll have a tick in that column if they're pool staff from another home in the company. And a tick if they're bank staff as well, just to signify any bank staff within the home as well. Some extra details you can have for them as well, such as a contact number if you need to get in touch with them, other events as if they've got anything else going on that day, like from our calendar, as we'll see in a little bit, and the option to message them from the rota as well, just to send them a text if they're able to cover that shift. But in this case, if we know who we want to do it, we could just click on them from here, and it will assign them onto that shift on the one day. Simple as that. Yes, if you're using a more flexible rota where you don't have set patterns, you'd go through each shift one by one, adding the staff members in to get them all filled up with the staff we need. And like I say, you can then go through day by day, shift by shift, filling each out one by one. So yes, those are kind of two main options you got for adding staff onto shifts there. But there are a couple of extra things we can do alongside that. Firstly, you can kind of assign cover to a series of shifts if you need to. It might be as part of a shift pattern or just someone covering a few shifts in a go, which you can do by clicking again in the staff column on the left-hand side. You have this option here that says covered. And you can use this essentially to kind of assign, it might be long-term cover to, say, someone who's off sick or on a holiday as part of a shift pattern, or just when you want to assign someone to a few shifts in a row, essentially. So, for example, on my night shifts here, I might have one person covering the rest of this week's night shifts, doing 4 in a row, for example. We can pop them in there. So say you choose the dates of when they'll be doing those shifts. So from tomorrow to, we'll do to Sunday, for example, 4 days. And then it will bring up a list of staff that will be able to do those shifts on those days. Again, based on the position on there, so I can choose from a few staff members I've got, pick the person I want, click save, and it will sign them into all those shifts in one go. So I say if it's kind of using the block rota, like where someone's doing a few days in a row, you can pop them all in one from there. Or it's typically more used if someone's kind of off on long-term sick or on a holiday. You can assign someone to cover kind of the entire time they're off using the covered option in there. So again, that's just, if you click in the staff column, the covered option there to do it for a specific date range. Then the final option you've got for assigning cover for a shift is through the agency. If you need to, you can cover shift with agency, as you can see with the brown button there at the top of the shift, which you can only do on individual shifts. You can't assign agency to a shift pattern. If I click on the brown button there, I can then fill out the details of the agency we're assigning this shift to. The details of the agency could all be set up in the background in your lookups in CoolCare, so you can have different agencies you use there and the names and different reasons for using them as well in there. And you can even say who's coming for the agency, who they're covering for, if someone off sick or on a holiday, and any additional notes you might have. And saving that adds a shift onto there, and you can see it quite clearly sticks out as well, brown compared to blue, so you can easily spot where agency is being used on your rotas. So yes, those are all the options you have for just adding a staff onto your rota in different ways. Like I say, assigning a temporary cover, and even agency where you might need it. But the big thing with this rota, this live rota on CoolCare, is once it is set up and you've got your staff on there, you can still move things around and change them as needed. So if any changes to your staffing happens and we need to kind of update the rota to reflect that, we can do that directly on here. Just by clicking on any shift that has a staff member assigned to it, you'll get a few options. Today we're going to be looking at the first two on here, which is changing staff and swapping shifts. That's the first option there, change staff, the blue button, is just if you need to change the name in a shift from one person to another. You might have assigned it incorrectly, or you might need to just change it from one, let's say, to a different person who's covering it instead. Whatever the reason might be, you can change it on there. So for example, this agency shift I have, actually, I can say, I found a staff member that's covering this shift now, so I don't need the agency in there anymore. I just need to change it to a regular staff member. So to do that, click on the shift there, use the blue button there, change staff, and it just takes us back to this box where we're then asking us who's doing that shift. You pick the person you want, and it will just assign them instead of who was on there originally. So in this case, going from agency to a regular staff member, and changing the call coding from brown to blue to show that we're now doing a regular staff member on that shift, and luckily not using any agency anymore. So easily enough just to change it around a shift from there. And you can even have two staff agree to swap their shifts and update the rota to reflect that as well. And this might be more if using the set patterns. You have two people that agree to swap their shifts as part of it. You can update the rota to reflect that. So if we might say two of my carers on the Friday and Saturday have agreed to swap their shifts, I can click on the first shift I want to swap. Go that one there, and use the purple button there, swap shift, which will then give the details of the first shift I've clicked on the left-hand side to see what we're swapping, and find the other shift to swap that with. You can filter that either by the date of the shift, if I say swap with Saturday, and we can find any shifts on that day you'll be able to swap with, or you can do it by staff name as well. If I just search for example, Julia, I can find all the shifts in there, and you can even use both of them to narrow it down as much as you need to. And once we've found the shift we want to swap with, click on it there to highlight it, and then click swap shift down the bottom to save it. And that we'll see there, you can see swaps their two names around, so they're now covering each other's shifts. It just moves the actual names in the shifts, doesn't move the actual position of them or anything like that. It's just saying who's doing each shift will be swapped around in there. So that way you can kind of see that they were originally part of each other's shift patterns, and they've just swapped those two dates in there to show that they're covering each other's. So yeah, let's see. That's a couple options there, changing staff and swapping shifts. The other one was we'll actually be seeing in our next session as well. But yes, it's just small changes you can make there. You're affecting one shift if you're swapping things around. You're affecting two if you're, you're affecting one shift if you're just changing stuff. You're affecting two if you're swapping the shifts, but it's never going to upset anything in the long term. That's the big thing with this rota that I always like to stress, is it's all about small short-term changes you can make to keep things moving as things have to change with your staff. That's the other big thing the rota can do is interact with your calendar. So where you may have holidays and absences, even training on there, it can all feed through onto your rota as well. So as I was scrolling across earlier, some people may have noticed one shift that was a slightly different color, which over here you can see I've got one in yellow. And that's because there is a holiday request for that shift. So this staff member, Julia here, has put in a holiday request for that date, the 30th, to say that they want that day off on there, to show that they say they might be being taken off of that. So you're aware of it on here. And that means we can then check that on my calendar. So if I go to my calendar under the staff section, we will find under there, your calendar, when it loads up, shows you your current month and anything you've got going on in there. And if I scroll down to the bottom here to the 30th, I can see there that holiday request that Julia has put in. In this case, actually for 2 days, both the 30th and then the 1st of September. Sorry, the 1st of October even on that. And from here, I can then click on that and we can take a look at in this side. So with the whole request, you can see the days they've requested on there and they will appear on the right-hand side. The hours here, I'm just going to fill them in myself quickly to say how much holding entitlement they'll be using on each day. And actually it's going to be 11 on the first day and 0 on the second. And that's how it would work typically when you put in the hold request after they're on the rota. It will be able to pick up the hours from their shift pattern and say what hours would be used on what days. So in this case, they're working on the 30th, but not on the 1st. So I've put in 11 hours on there for their holiday request and 0 because they're not working on that day anyway. So by default, they will start as requested to say, they've put in their request, but they've not been actioned yet. And in here, we can then either authorize or decline it, those days. And that's so if they say yes, they can have those days off, we can authorize it in here, and that will remove it. That will be able to update everywhere else. If we say no, you can't have those days off, then it would be declined, and so we can't change it in there. So in this case, I'm going to authorize this holiday, which is going to take 11 hours off of their holiday entitlements and take them off of the rota once I save it. So it's when you mark it as authorized and then save the holiday request, that is when this box will appear, asking you, do you want to remove this person from the rota for those days? In this case being the 30th and the 1st of October. If I say yes to that, then the holiday will be marked as authorized in my calendar, as you can see there with the little green underline, and that will have affected my rota. I go back to it. You should see on here, if I scroll across to that date, all the way to the end of the month, we can now see the shift is unassigned. So it's showing us white on there because the staff members no longer assigned to it. And it even says because of a holiday in there, that's why it's been unassigned. So you can easily see where the shifts have been unassigned based on the stuff that's been done in the calendar. And that can then show us that we need to find cover for that date. As well as that's just to show you on the shift itself as well. A holiday will show up in this other events column. If I scroll down, you can see that holiday authorized. So we know it's in there as well when we're looking to who can actually do that shift. So yes, that's how the holidays would affect the rota. And absences would affect it very much in the same way. So if I go again to my calendar, we can add something in for that as well. Once again, we'll choose today's date actually, for actually add it in from scratch this time. So click on the day you want to add in the absence for, and then choose what we're adding in. In this case, as I say, the absence. We choose a staff member, so I'll go with, it was Jade who was on my rota for the day, I can pop in. You can say when the absence is. So if it's just a single day, you can leave it as is. And you can even pop in the times as well. So if it's multiple days or just a certain part of the day, you can choose and identify that as you need to. As well as that, you have your reason for absence. So just saying why the person is absent today. And this list can be customized on your system, so you might have different options on yours compared to mine. So I'm going to go say they've called in sick, so they can no longer work today. Like that. And then we do the bit on the right-hand side as well. So it's just the one day they're absent for, so it's just got the one line on there. The hours I do to populate manually in this case. If you are using the more flexible rotas where the staff members are just kind of added in one by one, the hours won't come across from the rota. You will need to add them in manually on here. It's only with fixed shift patterns that it can pick up the hours from the rota. So just be aware of that when you're doing that on here. And by default, the absence will start as unauthorized in CoolCare to say we're just finding out what's going on before we make our decision. But then once it's all been confirmed, you can authorize the absence, and like authorizing a holiday, that will be able to remove them from the rota. So if I save that in here, again, similar to the calendar, similar to the holiday, that will then pop up here to say that this person needs to be removed from the rota for this day. I can say yes to that, so that's fine, which will then obviously put the absence on the calendar there. And if I feed back to my rota, that's where if I bring it up, we can see they've been removed from that shift today in there. And in this case, again, because it's not part of a repeating shift pattern, it won't say why. But again, if you click into the shift itself, it will show up in the other events as well. And it will ping absence to say that person's been made absent today. That's yeah. The other events column is just a flag there to say that person has been marked as absent or on holiday today. It won't actually stop you from being able to add them onto the shift. So As an example, if someone had to come in on the holiday to cover an emergency, we can still put them on the rota even if they are on holiday. So just be aware of that. But it also means you can, put someone on there if they're absent. So, but yes, keep an eye out as you're adding those in. But yes, all that I did with the calendar is just to help with that interaction with your rota, removing people from the shifts, and then, as I showed you before, that's where we can then find cover for them in terms of seeing who else is available to cover the shift. And if they've got contact details, we can get in touch with them or message them, which we'll look at in a bit of detail in our next session, I believe. Or if we need to, bring an agency as well, or change things around with the shift itself if we need to. But yes, so plenty of options to go through with your rota there, and all about that interaction. It's all say small, single shifts we're changing. Like I say, the very most you're swapping around 2 shifts, but it's never going to be anything more than that you're changing on the rota in one go. Of it's other than obviously adding people onto repeating shift patterns where obviously they kind of put on there and they're left to it. But yes, it's all about that flexibility with this live rota, which we'll see even more in our next webinar masterclass in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, that's actually all to show you for now without getting too ahead of ourselves. Just to go back to my presentation. If you are interested in having any other further training on CoolCare, feel free to get in touch with us and our training team. You may be entitled to some free training if you have some available to use, 30 minutes free of charge training sessions. If you contact us at training, you can email or call us and we can check your training availability and say get something booked in for you if you did want any further training on the system. Any part of CoolCare can be, the rotas or anything else you can think of. And then all left to say is thank you for joining us for today. And in our next session, at the advanced rota management, we'll be looking at a bit more of the rota management side of things in terms of changing shifts in there, as well as even adding new shifts onto the system, adding new shift patterns onto CoolCare through our rota setup we'll be seeing in that one, and some more advanced stuff on that side of things. So yes, if you're interested in that, so it will be available in a couple of weeks, say 2 weeks' time, same time as today. You'll get an email about that to be able to join our next one. So thank you all for coming. And if anyone does have any further questions, we'll be sticking around for 5 minutes to answer any of the questions people might have. And see. But yes, thank you all for joining us and have a nice day.